and welcome back to the Intern's Oddities. I am trying a new layout, as you may have noticed. I'm going to try to mix things up a little bit for each episode from here on out. And as you may have noticed, I also have given myself a new icon. I think my camera's mirrored, so I'm not really sure if my hands are in the right position, but whatever. But I got myself a new little icon over here, so that's pretty nice. So today we're going to be talking about sacred geometry and decoding reality as we know it. Now, yesterday we were speaking of sacred geometry, and I admit we did get a little sidetracked, but to be honest and to be fair, sacred geometry can be a lot to take in for new people. So I feel like it was okay for us to get a little sidetracked. We just don't want to make a habit out of that. But anyways, it was a lot of fun. We had fun though. So today we explore geometry, not just as math, but as meaning, shapes that speak and spirals that whisper, codes that build our reality. So first, I wanted to start with the Fibonacci spiral, which is seen in galaxies, nautilus shells, and sunflowers. The Fibonacci spiral is a visual representation of the golden ratio. It encodes expansion, organic growth, and harmonic structure in the universe, a symbol of divine proportion and recursive design. So let's go ahead and start with the nautilus shell. So over here we have the nautilus shell, and as you can see right here at the center, we start in and it kind of spirals out a little bit. And it's very interesting to think about all the different things in nature that have spirals. And I added an overlay with some spirals and seed of life, Metatron's cube, all sorts of geometric patterns for this. So I think one of the reasons that we call it sacred geometry is because of how many different things it affects and how much just natural stuff in the world is based on this kind of stuff. From something as small as a nautilus shell or something as natural as a sunflower. Look at these spirals in the sunflower right here. Let's hide that overlay for a minute. So look at these spirals in the flower right here. It's just so beautiful and perfect. And the crazy thing to me is how these Fibonacci spirals go from such small things like sunflowers and seashells all the way to the largest things, including our very galaxy itself. Look at that beautiful Milky Way right there. It may not be a chocolate bar, but look at that spiral. And see, that's the thing is with all this stuff, how can we still say that there is no intelligent design when we have so many spirals? And I'm not saying that it is intelligent design. I'm simply implying that it could be intelligent design. Because if not intelligent design, then I propose to you, what is your explanation? Why do you believe there are so many spirals and so many natural things in nature? So it is a visual representation of the golden ratio, as I said, and it encodes expansion, organic growth, and harmonic structure in the universe, a symbol of divine proportion and recursive design. Because if you look, let's look at the galaxy again. Take that overlay off. Let's look at the galaxy again, okay? Right here, recursive design, meaning that it starts at point 0 and expands in the spiral forever and ever, and theoretically, according to the sacred geometry, the spiral should never crash into another spiral because it is just so absolutely mathematically perfect that should never ever happen. So that is very impressive. And I find it's just something to think about with how much it goes out like that. All right, so next we're going to take this out, and now we're going to move on and discuss the seed of life. Now, the seed of life is composed of 7 interlocking designs. Let me go ahead and give you an example. So here is the seed of life drawn, overlaid with the cell structure of a plant. And here's an alternative version with a little more detail and some more saturation. And what's really interesting is when you start to look at it, it's all over the place, even down to our very DNA. Look at the seed of life overlaid a DNA helix. It almost feels like the it almost feels like sacred geometry is some sort of like molecular coding system almost. And some people say it speaks to them over time, like as you look at the symbols, and a lot of these can be used for meditation, as we're going to get into in a minute with Metatron's cube. But before we get ahead of ourselves, the seed of life is composed of 7 interlocking circles. As you can tell right here, 7 interlocking circles, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then that in the middle, it has that little flower. The reason they call it the seed of life, and the reason the flower is there, is it is found in cellular mitosis and plant structure. It represents the blueprint of intelligent, or godlike for some, creation, and the foundational pattern of all organic and spiritual life forms. So basically what we're saying is, at the core root of life, all the way from the mighty mitochondria of the plant, all the way to the double helix within our DNA, it all adheres to standard mathematical equations of geometry. And that is just mind-blowing for some people. Like, how is it so perfect no matter where it is? And it's not like we just, we discovered it. It's not like we created, sacred geometry. We discovered it. And then you got Metatron's cube, which I'll show you here in just a second. Let me find a good one. I like this one. I got a couple of different images for this one. So here is the Metatron's cube. I have a golden version and then a red version. I like the red version myself, so I'll leave that one up for now. So Metatron's cube contains all 5 platonic solids, as Spider told us about yesterday. And those are geometric shapes that form the foundation of all physical matter. So you could say Metatron's cube is similar to the boson Higgs particle. It is the building block of all matter, like an atom, or a cell, or a molecule. It represents the balance and structure of life as we know it to be. It is a tool for protection, meditation, and insight. And like we were looking at it yesterday, couldn't you just see yourself sitting here staring at this for hours? And like, look, the version I found over here, look at this version. It has cubes in the cubes, and those cubes in the center are supposed to represent the 5 platonic solids. Now let's continue, and now we're going to get into some really interesting stuff. Sacred sites and symbols. Okay? So with sacred sites and symbols, as you are probably already well aware, we have the pyramids, in ancient Egypt and all that. So if you go look at the pyramids over in ancient Egypt, let me find my image real quick. Give me just a second. I got to find my image. It's down here somewhere. And let's see, where is it? Here it is. Here it is. Here is an image of the pyramid with the seed of life overlaid on top of it. And it kind of looks a little bit like Metatron's cube as well. And it's just like, how did the ancient Egyptians that long ago, how did they know about sacred geometry? And then look over here. You even got sacred geometry on the old Gothic cathedrals. As we were speaking about a few weeks ago when we were talking about Falconelli and other alchemists throughout history, well, Falconelli released a book about all the sacred geometry and alchemy hidden within the Gothic cathedrals. So maybe Fulcanelli was onto something there. Maybe he found something that we didn't quite understand, and maybe he wrote a book to try to help people try to understand it better because he knew how important it was, and he knew how important that these symbols were, not just in alchemy or making potions or whatever, but what if he knew the sacred geometry as a key to learning something more, learning knowledge from a higher dimension that we don't understand. Perhaps sacred geometry might be a quantum map to try and help guide people towards a higher level of understanding. So, what if sacred geometry could be the key to understanding reality as we know it? Because if you really think about it, it's just with the pyramids of Egypt being and everything else, and the Gothic cathedrals, DNA, plant cells, it's all a little bit too perfect. And, for me personally, I have my own personal experience with this. When I discovered the Fibonacci sequence 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, I think it is. You get the idea. It just keeps going perpetually from there, but it's recursive because if you do it backwards, it goes all the way back down to 0. And that's the Collett's conjecture. That's a whole other topic, and I'm gonna try not to get too far into that. But essentially the Fibonacci sequence goes forwards, ever expanding, and the Collett's conjecture goes backwards, ever decreasing, all the way back down to 0. So these two mathematical things joined together almost seem like the alpha and the omega, the beginning and the end. They are two halves of the same whole, and there's something here that we truly don't understand. And now, going back to some of these sacred sites and symbols, let's pull up the picture of the pyramids of Egypt again, okay? Right here in the pyramids of Egypt, they are aligned with cosmic geometry and celestial grids. Now, it seems to me it would be very strange for that all to be coincidental. How did the ancient Egyptians know exactly where to build the pyramids to be aligned with cosmic geometry and celestial grids? And how did they build the pyramids? We still don't understand how they built the pyramids, even with our modern technology. Some people suggest that they could have built the pyramids with frequencies and harmonics using powers and knowledge that we no longer have access to. And I think that's a highly likely, scenario and possibility. Because, as you all know about Tesla, when he was working with harmonics and the quantum field and all of the stuff he was working on, he used ley lines, which go right through pyramids. And he was working on creating an energy ray. Let's call it an energy ray. And some people, not going to name names, but, some people didn't approve of him and what he was doing. So they took his energy ray, which I personally believe he intended to use that energy ray as a means of defending himself and shielding himself from the negative energies and the other negative harmonics of the world. That is my theory. But he's gone. It's been a long time. And they took his research. You know who. I'm not going to say the name. We're not trying to get political here. But, some people took his research. And as a result, I don't think we will ever know the truth about what he was seeking. It's all just going to be up to speculation for the rest of our lives. But he was onto something. Whether we ever find out what it was or not, he was definitely onto something with that energy ray that he was working on. So now let's move back over to the Gothic cathedrals. All right. So over in the Gothic cathedrals, they're encoded with sacred ratios, rose windows, and even vaults reflecting divine harmony. For example, the Vatican and their secret archives, they might have some information on that. That's one of my theories, but I'm going to save that for a whole other episode. But that's what I think they mean by vaults reflecting divine harmony. What that means is we're trying to talk about all the information that is kept underneath some of these churches and what that information truly is, what it truly means, and why are they so intent on keeping that information hidden? What could people do with that information that makes it so dangerous as to, keep it hidden for so long? And in addition to that, if the information is so dangerous in the first place, theoretically, if the information is theoretically dangerous, then what gives them the right to access that information over anyone else to access that information? So there's a lot to go into here with all this as well. And the next thing is with the DNA in plant cells. Now, I believe that DNA in plant cells are living geometry mirroring the seed of life, because as I showed you on these pictures over here, the plant cells, they look very similar to the seed of life, and you can see it a lot better when you line it up. And with the DNA helix as well, you can see all this when you look at the images. So the point being, if this is reflecting, it all seems to be reflecting nature's mathematical intelligence. But why does nature have a mathematical intelligence? That is the real question we should be asking ourselves. Because if sacred geometry is something that we discovered, now stay with me here, okay? If sacred geometry is something that we discovered, not created, then why is it so perfect? Why is it so intricately based on math? And why are there no anomalies in it? Ever. Ever. It is always, always perfect. So I believe that it is very interesting to think about how it's just so perfect. I don't know how else to word it. Now, in closing, we're almost done. The last thing I would like to discuss is the universal interpretation of sacred geometry and what it truly means. Now, these symbols span space and time, revealing a hidden language woven into the structure of reality. Because as we've said, the Fibonacci spiral, for example, is in almost everything, from the smallest things, such as sunflowers, to seashells, to the largest things, our entire cosmology. Our entire cosmology consists of spirals and other aspects of sacred geometry. So my point being, whether they are found in plants, architecture, or galaxies, sacred geometry reflects design by something far older, deeper, and more intelligent than we may ever fully comprehend. So my task for you, if you choose to do it, is if you want to study sacred geometry further, if you have any interest in this, maybe you could start by trying to meditate on these forms and the shapes, not with your eyes, but with your intuition. Just look at them. Don't think too much. Just stare at them. Clear your mind and try to think with your soul. Don't see them with your eyes. Feel them with your soul. And then let me know what you see. Come back and, come in the comments and let us know what you see if you try meditating on these forms. So, for example, tonight or tomorrow, whenever you feel like doing this, some point in the near future, if you would like to do an experiment with sacred geometry, why don't you look for the spiral in nature? Try to see what you can find in nature with spiral designs on it. Cauliflower, pine cones, trees. See what you can find with spiral designs on it. For example, right now I'm looking at my webcam and there's a spiral design in the circle of the webcam. There you go. There's a freebie. There's a freebie for you. Or maybe you could try to sketch the seed of life from memory if you're more of an artistic person. Try to sketch the seed of life from memory and see how well you can draw it, and then look it up and see how well you did. It's like trying to tap into your intuition, perhaps. Because sometimes the act of drawing is enough to trigger remembrance. And maybe, some people do believe in, like, ancestral memories, and ancestral DNA is a theory that's out there. So if you have any interest in that, maybe, this might help you do some studying into ancestral DNA. And as I said, sometimes drawing is enough to help you remember. It could be like a key to help you unlock some ancient knowledge that you have forgotten. But maybe your body is just waiting for you to seek out the right bit of information in the right topic, or draw the right symbol, and the muscle memory will trigger something deep, deep down within your DNA that will make you question things, as it did for me with the Fibonacci spiral. So that's all I have for you today, and I hope you had fun going through this stuff with me. And so, this was some pretty interesting stuff, and I know it can be a little, deep and a lot mathematical, but there is some important stuff hidden somewhere in this, let's just say, coding. There's something hidden deep within all this symbolism and esotericism. I think there's something there. So let us know what you think. And as always, stay uncanny. Thank you, and we will see you next time.